Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, January 8th, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski. Now, if you've been following the political environment for quite some time now, you will know that she is one of the more moderate Republicans who have sided previously with the Democratic Party on a multitude of issues and a multitude of confirmments and pretty much just nominations from President Trump. That's where she's most notably and reputably well known amongst the Democratic Party. And looking at this recent statement that was updated probably just a few hours ago, it says published 2 hours ago. Well, first things first, major headline is that she's calling on President Trump to resign. And then she goes into questioning whether or not she is, a representative of the Republican Party, whether or not the Republican Party is a party that she would want to be under in the future. And this would have serious implications on the entire national electorate because Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski, she's someone who the Democratic Party wouldn't prefer over a Democrat, but would prefer over any type of right-winger from the state of Alaska, for sure. And she won her previous elections by a plurality both times, so she is someone who is well known for winning by pluralities. If we actually go back to 2016, she won with just 44.36% of the vote in the Alaska election in 2010. This was actually right after she was appointed to be senator. She only won with 39.5% of the vote. But the reason why it was so notable is because Lisa Murkowski ran as a write-in candidate. The candidate she ran against was Joe Miller. He came back for revenge in 2016, but failed again. And in 2022, Republicans are looking to try to take advantage of this new ranked choice voting in the state of Alaska. But chances are most Democrats are going to support Lisa Murkowski, given her somewhat bipartisan record. I mean, if Susan Collins can call herself bipartisan, so can Lisa Murkowski. And I think that what you're looking at in 2022 is likely going to be just a result between two Republicans at the top of the ticket, and the Democratic Party shoves all their support to Lisa Murkowski. But it may not come down to a point where Lisa Murkowski will be running as a Republican. As we found out from Wednesday's events, many Republicans were very upset with President Trump. She says, quote, "I want him to resign. I want him out. He has caused enough damage." We are roughly, 12 days away from President Trump officially vacating office, and there are still notable Republicans. Lisa Murkowski is one of the most well-known Republican senator names that we have out here, and she is calling for President Trump to resign. And she's not the only Republican that likely hopes Donald Trump will resign or could possibly vote on impeachment of President Trump following Wednesday's events. Wednesday's events were so horrific that there were so many Republicans that turned on President Trump. His administration is falling apart, and now he's been banned from Twitter. He's been banned from Facebook. It looks as if Parler, the conservative version of Twitter, is being taken off the Play Store and taken off the App Store. Number one, I think largely because the Democratic Party now has the majority. Oh, I'm sorry for that. Largely because they have the majority in the United States Senate, but also moving forward, Donald Trump won't be president, so they won't need to keep him on Twitter. They won't need to keep him on Facebook when there are so many things that he spread that was just blatant misinformation. So Lisa Murkowski, where does it get down to a point where we could actually see her considering joining the Democratic Party? Well, she begins to question whether or not she wants to remain as a Republican member, and she said it pretty much had to do with the political party. This is her entire quote. "Well, there's a lot of people who actually thought that I did in 2010, that I became an independent. I didn't have any reason to leave my party in 2010. I was a Republican who ran a write-in campaign, and I was successful." If you remember in the beginning of the video, she ran and won off a write-in campaign, won with just 39.5% of the vote. But I will tell you, if the Republican Party has become nothing more than the party of Trump, I sincerely question whether this party is for me. That was the direct quote from Senator Lisa Murkowski. Well, considering that 75% of Republicans want Donald Trump to remain as a notable name in the Republican Party, leading it into future elections, it's very possible that she ends up changing her party registration. Because Lisa Murkowski hasn't exactly been the most firm confirmer of President Trump and everything that he stands for. She is someone who has definitely taken a more moderate approach, at least moderate comparative to other Republicans in the United States Senate. She's still a Republican at heart. But if she doesn't feel the Republican Party truly represents her, and she's already declared her bid for 2022, I think it's very possible that she decides to run in 2022 as an independent. And if she's chosen by the people, she may end up caucusing with the Democratic Party. But she could do it before then, because she's essentially calling on President Trump to resign. And if it goes to a vote for impeachment in the United States Senate, and the Republican Party displays their loyalty to President Trump once again, she may end up changing party affiliations. She reminds me of a Senator Arlen Specter from the state of Pennsylvania. He was a longtime Republican. He was a Republican from 1965 through 2009. Well, he left the Senate in 2011, but he was a notable name because he switched over to the Democratic Party. He switched over to the Democratic Party in 2009. When he switched over to the Democratic Party, he gave the Democratic Party a supermajority. What does that mean? That means 60 Senate seats, a filibuster-proof majority, to put it into simpler terms. So looking at Arlen Specter, it's not crazy to assume that a decade later, nearly exactly a decade later, another senator could do the exact same thing. Arlen Specter was very clear about his beliefs about the Republican Party, about the way that the Republican Party had gotten. He aligned more with the Democratic Party, and he ran as a Democrat in his re-election bid in 2010. He lost in the primary, largely because he wasn't a long-term Democrat. He'd only changed political party affiliations 1 year before the primary. But Lisa Murkowski, because there is now the implementation of ranked choice voting, I think if she switches parties to the Democratic Party or as an independent who caucuses with the Democratic Party, she could still very easily win the 2022 Senate election, because all she needs to do is get into the final round. Republicans, if faced between a Democrat and a Republican, would likely choose her, and Democrats between a Republican and her, they would likely choose her, and Republicans faced between a Democrat and her would likely choose her. So no matter what, depending on who the top two candidates are, if it's a Republican versus a Republican, the Democrats are going to shuffle all of their votes to her. If it's a Democrat in her, the Republicans are likely to shuffle all their votes to her. So I think because ranked choice voting has now been implemented, she will be in a very good position. And it's also possible, if she chooses to caucus with the Democratic Party, that the Democratic Party agrees to not run a candidate in the state of Alaska. There was a Democrat on the ballot in 2016. They received 11.62% of the vote. Only 1 in 10 voters in Alaska voted for this Democratic nominee. Hillary Clinton got around 40% of the vote in this state. So what you're actually a little bit above 40%, I believe. But looking at the amount of support that the Democratic candidate got, it was partially due to the fact that the independent candidate took away, Joe Miller took away, and some Democrats actually supported Lisa Murkowski because she wasn't as right-wing as Joe Miller. She wasn't as right-wing as alternatives in that race. And looking at 2022, ranked choice voting would be a very easy way for Lisa Murkowski to win this election. She has always been someone who has won by a plurality, but I can guarantee it, 90% of that Democratic vote would have voted for her. In 2010, when you're looking at the Democratic candidate here, I can guarantee it, 90% of them probably would have voted for Lisa Murkowski. So in 2022, I expect nothing different. And it's not that Alaska is a super conservative state either. Alaska only voted for Donald Trump by 10 points. Yes, that seems like a lot, but it's not in Alabama, it's not in Wyoming, it's not in Idaho, though it used to be nearly as solid for the GOP. By no means this election. By no means last election. Donald Trump won it by 14 points. So Lisa Murkowski, I think, is set, regardless of what she decides to do. But her questioning whether or not the Republican Party is for her, could very well put the Democratic Party in an outright majority in the Senate. Because even if she doesn't outright join the Democratic Party, even if she just decides to change as an independent, when you are an independent in Congress, you need to caucus with the party. Otherwise, you will be useless. You won't have any resources at your disposal. That's why you see Angus King in Maine, Bernie Sanders in Vermont. They're independents. They are registered independents, but they caucus with the Democratic Party, and as a result, they get the resources of the Democratic Party. They get the endorsement of the Democratic Party in their re-election bids. Lisa Murkowski would likely take over Republicans with her on top of the endorsement from the Democratic Party. She would likely split the GOP in Alaska because the Alaska GOP is not a super conservative base. I don't think people realize that. Alaska is not this ultra-conservative state. She can get that 45% that Joe Biden got in the state, plus an additional 6 points out of the Republican base that elected her twice, and still win the Senate election. So looking at the possibility of this happening, if she decides, and let's say the Senate decides to acquit President Trump again, which chances are they will, she may end up switching political parties. And that could completely throw off the balance of power in the United States Senate. Completely throw off the balance of power. Because this would put the Democratic Party at an outright majority. Joe Manchin would lose all type of leeway because that would just bring it down to a tie. And then Kamala Harris swings in and she votes with the Democratic Party. Looking at the 2022 Senate elections, actually, we're going to get rid of this map. We're going to look at 2022. Well, it looks better for the Democratic Party, assuming that Lisa Murkowski does end up changing political parties. Now, it's not a done deal. She's still a registered Republican. This is just something that's been discussed. But the fact that it's even being discussed really starts to tell the Republican Party that they may be in for a very long 4 years. Because if they start to see more party defectors, especially as a result of what happened on Wednesday, only one person will be solely responsible, but the entire political party will face the consequences. I'm going to fill this in based off the current party characterization in all of these states, based off who currently controls these states. And you will see, even based off who currently controls it, the Democratic Party still is in the majority because nothing changes from the 2020 election. But in a scenario where the Democratic Party is able to enjoy Alaska being blue, because Lisa Murkowski could very well win there, even as a registered Democrat or as a registered independent caucusing with the Democratic Party. If the Democrats just won the states that they did in 2020, well, it would put the Democratic Party at a 53-47 majority. Alaska provides that buffer for the Democratic Party in what is expected to be a Republican wave year. But what we saw transpire at the Capitol on Wednesday is part of the final moments of the Trump presidency. You see, President Trump's ability to change the media cycle in just a few hours at that, has not been comparable to any other president, to any other candidate running for president. Hillary's emails were covered for years. Hillary's Benghazi scandal covered for years. Donald Trump's Access Hollywood tape for maybe a week. And then it was right back to James Comey and the email scandal. And we know right before the election he gets rid of it, but that was all the media cared about. And I would say that's largely due to the fact that Donald Trump does things that changes the media cycle. He knows how to work the TV. He knows how to work media sources. He did it on The Apprentice. He did it in the past. He knows how to redirect attention around him. And for Donald Trump, any press is good press. Well, now that he's off, the Republican Party is going to have that staining image in the minds of every suburban American, every rural American, every urban American, knowing that in Donald Trump's final days, the Capitol building was raided, and the Republican Party did not convict him. The Republican Party did not force him out of office. And that's something I think that the Democratic Party can really play up in 2022. Because, yes, it could be expected to be a Republican wave, but their first showing of that should have been Georgia. What happened? The Democrats flipped those two seats. Traditionally, these races get closer for a certain political party. The Republican Party dominated Georgia for 20 years up until now. The Democrats, thanks Stacey Abrams because she expedited that, but one other person also expedited that, Donald Trump. And with a number of Republicans actually enabling President Trump to a certain degree, Ron Johnson, other Republicans, Marco Rubio for a period of time, Richard Burr for a period of time. These are names that the Democratic Party is not going to let you forget as long as the elections are up. They are not going to let you forget that Ron Johnson went into Congress with every intention of voting to uphold the election results not being certified, to uphold the election objection in Pennsylvania and Arizona. All of that contributed to what happened on Wednesday. And Lisa Murkowski seems just as horrified as every American should be, just as horrified as many other Republicans in Congress, except she's the only one who's floated with the idea of leaving her political party as a member who's vying for a re-election bid. So looking at Alaska, that may be a state where the Democratic Party might actually have a pretty comfortable pickup. It'd be the same senator, but it would be a party flip. If the Republican Party does not realign itself by mid-2021, I can guarantee she would consider this much more heavily because the Republican Party has time to act. They have 12 days to show Lisa Murkowski and other Republicans that they are not solely the party of Trump. But when you have 75% of the Republican Party wanting Donald Trump to remain as a very notable name in the party, it's kind of difficult to argue that. It's kind of difficult to see how that could actually happen. Because if the majority of the party wants them, nobody's going to care what the minority thinks. That's generally how American politics works. And while the Republican Party may not have a winning strategy for years to come because of that, so be it. Because that's exactly what the majority of their party wants to do. And that could completely screw over Republicans' chances at 2022. I talked about Donald Trump hurting the Republican Party. Well, now he's hurting them in the own party itself. Not only is he going to, he did encourage a number of these senators and representatives to back him in Congress, despite no evidence of voter fraud whatsoever, he's now turning his own party members away from the GOP. He's turning senators away. This is news. Lisa Murkowski could actually end up switching political parties. And if she does that, the Republican Party is going to be in big trouble because she's going to be an independent or a Democrat that won't be adding to their numbers through 2022 through 2028 if she wins re-election. I would bet on her winning re-election. And that would be something that would be very horrible for the GOP because Alaska is an area that the Republican Party should be doing well in. Georgia is an area where the Republican Party should be doing well in. Arizona is an area where the Republican Party should be doing well in. Are they doing well? No. 4 Democratic senators, 0 Republican senators from Arizona and Georgia. If she actually follows through with leaving the GOP, I can't imagine she'd caucus with them because it's still working with the same political party. And if she changes her political party and becomes an independent, she will need to caucus with the party. She might try to ride it out for a month or two, but she's going to realize, and many people already realize, which is why nobody does it, that when you're an independent, you need to caucus with the party because you need the resources. She's going to be left high and dry. The Democratic Party is going to try to convince her, but if they can't convince her, well, she's just an independent. She's just someone who's there. But if she chooses the Democratic Party, if she chooses to caucus with the Democratic Party, I can't imagine the Republican Party would be too ecstatic about that. But it would already put the Democrats at a clear advantage into the 2022 Senate elections, which is exactly what the Republican Party wants to avoid. They wanted to avoid the 2 losses in Georgia. Well, they weren't working hard enough, clearly. Or they ticked off enough suburban voters, especially in the Atlanta metro area, that almost the entire state shifted to the left, county by county. Donald Trump was someone who actually helped Republicans on a presidential margin, but now that he's out, he doesn't hold the weight that he would if he was on the same ballot. He does not drive out these supporters the same way that he previously would. These supporters are not going to vote for some lackluster Republican they view as a rhino. If they can't primary them, they're probably not voting for them. On top of that, the GOP cannot win on the old traditional GOP, maybe in some states, but overall, they do have to acknowledge that their party has become the party of Trump. But when you have senators and representatives that are pushing away Trump, but still trying to win over the traditional GOP, you can try to win an election based off the traditional GOP, but they have to realize that Donald Trump has seeped so deep into their party that still, after losing an election, the first president to lose House, Senate, and presidency since the 1930s, still 3 and 4 Republicans say, we want him back on board. We want him campaigning for us. We want him making speeches. We want him at the convention. Think about that. There is no good pathway for the Republican Party moving forward. Either they completely push away Trump and lose a lot of their base, or they completely, grab onto him. There's no in between. President Trump will call you a rhino if you vote against him once. Loyalty is not a double-way street with this president, with any of his family members. And the Republican Party has acknowledged that. Many Republicans have acknowledged that. There are plenty of Republicans out there that are viewed as rhinos, even though they're much more conservative in values than Donald Trump. Much more conservative in values than their Democratic opponents. But people would rather see them lose because they didn't fully fledged endorse Donald Trump. And while there are some surviving quote-unquote rhinos, Lisa Murkowski is one of them, Ben Sasse is another, the rest have really tried to appeal to President Trump. But following the events on Wednesday, there is no good pathway for the GOP moving forward. Either they, make their own supporters angry, regardless of which way they go. There is no in-between. There is no half Trump, half traditional. They'll try to get there. But as soon as they do something that Donald Trump isn't going to like, it's very possible, maybe not tweet because he's banned from Twitter, but through another outlet, try to convince his own supporters to not vote for a certain candidate. And I think that's largely what's going to end up hurting the GOP moving forward, and which is prompting a lot of discussion amongst Lisa Murkowski and prompting discussion amongst other Republicans to potentially impeach or remove President Trump through the invocation of the 25th Amendment. There are so many things that are being discussed right now amongst House and Senate Republicans, and one of them is leaving the political party. Under Donald Trump, we saw numerous resignations before the 2018 midterm elections. Before the 2020 election, numerous resignations, numerous primary defeats for traditional, more Romney-esque, McCain-esque Republicans. And if that is the trajectory that the Republican Party is going, Lisa Murkowski has said she will not be part of that party. She will question whether she's not, but if she has to say it as a lifelong Republican, chances are she's probably not going to end up being a Republican. So all eyes on the Republican Party. They're going to divide their party either way, but it comes down to which side they actually choose. Trump or Romney, McCain, Bush. One of them has won. Bush won, but Trump won by more. But also, what happened Wednesday really might push a lot of Republicans away from supporting Trump-like candidates, Trump rhetoric-style candidates in the future. But that will come down to the decision of the Republican Party, and it will have extreme consequences either way. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my post-2020 election videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.